The click was so soft I almost didn't hear it. Almost. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, still wearing my work boots, dust from the shop still clinging to my jeans, and I watched my wife's hand freeze on the mouse. Just for a second. Maybe less. But that second, that tiny fractured moment, felt like it stretched into something enormous, something that filled the entire room and pressed against my chest until I couldn't breathe properly. Lisa's screen flashed to the desktop. Blue background. A few scattered icons. Nothing. "Hey honey," she said, and her smile came too quick, too bright. Like she'd rehearsed it. "I've known this woman for 12 years. Married her when we were both young and stupid and so convinced we'd figured out what love meant. I know the difference between her real smile, the one that starts slow and reaches her eyes first, and this one. This manufactured thing that sat on her face like a mask." "Hey," I managed, forcing my own face into something neutral. Something that wouldn't betray the sudden hammering of my heart, the way my mind had already started racing backward, cataloging moments, searching for clues I'd missed. Just grabbing the trail maps. I walked to the closet, pulled open the door, pretended to look for something while my thoughts spiraled. What was on that screen? Why did she close it so fast? The rational part of my brain, the part that's gotten me through 12 years of marriage, 3 kids, a mortgage, all the ordinary chaos of building a life with someone, that part tried to speak up. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was shopping for a surprise. Maybe you're being paranoid. But the other part, the part one didn't even know existed until 30 seconds ago, whispered something darker. "You saw what you saw. That wasn't nothing. Did you find them?" Lisa asked behind me. I grabbed the maps from the shelf, even though I'd known exactly where they were the whole time. Even though I didn't actually need them right now. I just needed an excuse to be in this room, to act normal, to not let her see that something had shifted inside me. "Yeah, I got him." I turned back to face her, and she was still sitting there at the computer, her hands folded in her lap now, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Waiting for something. For me to ask? For me to accuse? I didn't give her either. "I'll be downstairs," I said and walked out. My legs felt strange as I moved through the hallway, like they belonged to someone else. Like I was watching myself from outside my own body. In the kitchen, I set the maps on the counter and stared at them without seeing them at all. 12 years. 3 kids. A mortgage. Date nights when we could manage them. Inside jokes. Shared silences that felt comfortable, not awkward. The life we'd built, brick by brick, day by ordinary day. And one click of a mouse had made all of it feel suddenly fragile. Like a house built on sand, and I just felt the first tremor beneath my feet. I pressed my palms flat against the cool granite countertop, trying to ground myself. Trying to think. Maybe it was nothing. But my hands were shaking. And somewhere deep in my gut, in that place where instinct lives, the place that knows things before your brain catches up, I already knew the truth. This wasn't nothing. This was everything starting to fall apart. I just didn't know how far the fall would go. I waited until after dinner. Lisa was downstairs folding laundry. I could hear the rhythmic snap of sheets, the soft tumble of fabric, and the kids were arguing over whose turn it was to pick the movie. Normal sounds. The soundtrack of our life. But nothing felt normal anymore. I stood in front of the computer, my hand hovering over the mouse like it might burn me. This was a line I'd never crossed before. In 12 years, I'd never snooped through Lisa's things. Never felt the need to. Trust was supposed to be the foundation we'd built everything on. Was I thought? Past tense. Was I thought? Past tense. Because whatever trust looked like, it didn't include closing your email the second your husband walked into the room. The email program was still open. Her inbox was empty, of course it was. But my hands moved almost on their own, clicking through folders. Set. Draft. And then, trash. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. There were dozens of messages in the trash folder, most of them promotional emails, spam, the usual digital debris. But one caught my eye. Recent. Deleted today, probably right before I came home. The sender's name was Dom. I clicked it open, and for a moment the words didn't make sense. My brain couldn't process what I was reading, like it was in a foreign language I'd never learned. Change of plans. John is coming with the family. You can still come, but I'll ask Kate to put you in the last cabin. We should get some time together because he'll be riding his motorcycle. I read it again. Then again. John is coming. My own name written like an obstacle. Like an inconvenience to be worked around. We should get some time together. The we wasn't me and Lisa. It was Lisa and Dom. Whoever the hell Dom was. My hands gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles went white. The room felt like it was tilting, like gravity had shifted and I couldn't find my balance anymore. This was the family trip to Lake Verona. The one Lisa's sisters had been planning for weeks. Lisa had mentioned it casually over breakfast last week. The girls are organizing a long weekend at the lake. I know you're swamped with work, so don't worry about coming. And I'd said I couldn't make it. I told her my schedule was packed, that I'd have to stay behind and catch up on jobs at the shop. She'd nodded, understanding, maybe even a little relieved. Until yesterday. Yesterday when my schedule cleared unexpectedly. When I told her I could join after all and she'd smiled that smile, the one I thought was genuine, and said, "Of course. That sounds fun. There are plenty of trails at the lake. The kids will love having you there. The kids will love having you there." And then I'd asked about bringing the motorcycle. "Do you mind if I bring the bike? There are trails, right?" "Of course," she'd said. "That sounds fun." Fun. For who? I stared at the screen until the words blurred. He'll be riding his motorcycle. They'd planned for this. Planned for me to be there but not really there. To be off on the trails while Lisa and this Dom person. I couldn't finish the thought. My mind veered away from it like touching a hot stove. Kate. Lisa's sister Kate was in on this. Putting Dom in the last cabin. How long had this been going on? How many people knew? How many of these family trips, these innocent weekends, had been covers for what? I heard footsteps on the stairs and my body moved on pure instinct. I closed the email, cleared the trash folder history, and moved away from the computer like I'd been electrocuted. Lisa appeared in the doorway, a basket of folded towels on her hip. "Hey, did you need the computer? I was going to pay some bills." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved since I was 23. The mother of my children. The person I'd built my entire adult life around. And I didn't recognize her. It was like staring at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "No," I said, and my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "All yours." She set the basket down and moved to the desk, and I watched her fingers on that same mouse, clicking through screens I couldn't see. Those hands had held our babies. Had held my face when my mother died. Had worn my ring for 12 years. What else had they done? I left the room before she could see whatever was written on my face. Before the composure I'd been clinging to cracked completely. In the hallway, I stopped and pressed my back against the wall, trying to breathe. Trying to think through the roaring in my head. I loved her. God help me, I still loved her. Loved the life we'd made, the family we'd built. Our kids were downstairs right now, safe and happy and innocent. And they had no idea their father was standing in a dark hallway feeling like his entire world was disintegrating. But she'd lied to me. Was lying to me. Had planned to meet another man, Dom, whoever he was, had a family trip while I rode around on my motorcycle like an oblivious fool. The betrayal felt physical, like a knife sliding between my ribs. But worse than the pain was the uncertainty. How deep did this go? How long had it been happening? And the question that terrified me most, what was I going to do about it? I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was dealing with. Not until I had answers to questions I was afraid to even ask. So I pushed off the wall and walked downstairs, where my children were laughing at something on TV, where the laundry smelled like fabric softener and everything looked exactly the way it had an hour ago. But nothing was the same. I was standing in the ruins of my marriage and nobody else could see the rubble yet. Just me. I couldn't sleep. Lisa lay beside me, her breathing deep and even, and I stared at the ceiling fan making its lazy rotations in the darkness. Every time I closed my eyes I saw that email. Change of plans. John is coming. Around 2 a.m. I gave up. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and padded down the hallway in bare feet. The house was silent except for the settling sounds old houses make, creaks and sighs, like it was dreaming. I found myself in the living room, standing in front of the built-in bookshelf. We kept everything here. Photo albums, the kids' baby books, my old military records, and tucked in the bottom shelf, Lisa's high school yearbook. I'd seen it a handful of times over the years, usually when she got nostalgic or when old friends came up in conversation. I'd never had a reason to look through it. Not really. My hands were steady as I pulled it out, but inside, everything felt like it was vibrating at the wrong frequency. The cover was worn, corners bent, the kind of aging that happens to things we keep but don't quite treasure. Lake City High School, class of 2001. I sat down on the couch and opened it, and the smell hit me immediately, that particular scent of old paper and teenage memories, of a life before me. Before us. I flipped through pages of strangers' faces, club photos, candid shots of kids who were now adults living lives I'd never know. And then I found the prom section. There she was. Lisa. 17 years old, wearing a pale blue dress that caught the camera flash, her hair longer than she'd worn it in years, her smile genuine and unguarded in a way that made my chest ache. She looked so young. So impossibly young. And next to her, his arm wrapped around her waist like he owned her, was Dom Thompson. I stared at his face. Strong jaw, confident smile, the kind of guy who probably never doubted himself for a second. He looked like he belonged in that picture, like holding Lisa was the most natural thing in the world. The caption underneath read, Dom Thompson and Lisa Martinez, prom king and queen. Martinez. Her maiden name. From before she became Lisa Brennan. Before she became mine. My throat felt tight. This wasn't just some guy from her past. This wasn't a random name in a deleted email. This was the guy. The high school sweetheart. The one she'd never really talked about, at least not in any detail that mattered. I turned more pages and he was everywhere. Dom and Lisa at homecoming. Dom and Lisa in the parking lot with their friend group. Dom and Lisa laughing at something off camera, their bodies angled toward each other in that unconscious way people do when they're completely in sync. They looked happy. More than happy, they looked inevitable. Like the kind of couple everyone assumed would get married right after graduation and live happily ever after in their hometown. But they didn't, did they? I tried to remember what Lisa had told me about her high school years. Not much. She'd always waved it off as typical teenage drama and changed the subject. I'd never pushed. Why would I? That was ancient history. A different lifetime. Except it wasn't, was it? Not if Dom was meeting her at Lake Verona. Not if Kate was putting him in the last cabin. Not if they were planning to get some time together, while I rode around on my motorcycle like a goddamn fool. I stared at that prom photo until my eyes burned. Trying to understand. Trying to piece together a story from fragments and deleted emails and a yearbook picture taken before I even knew Lisa existed. Had she loved him? Obviously she had. You don't look at someone like that, captured forever in cheap yearbook photography, if there's nothing there. Had she ever stopped? The question landed in my stomach like a stone dropping into deep water. What if I was never the first choice? What if I was the backup plan, the safe option she settled for when whatever she had with Dom fell apart? What if our entire marriage, our 12 years together, our 3 kids, our whole life, what if all of it was just second best? I closed the yearbook carefully and slid it back onto the shelf, making sure it sat in exactly the same spot, at exactly the same angle. Like I'd never touched it. Like I'd never seen what I'd seen. But I couldn't unsee it now. Dom Thompson wasn't a stranger. He was her first love. Maybe her real love. And somehow, after all these years, after a marriage and children and a life that should have been ours alone, he'd found his way back into her orbit. Or maybe, and this thought made my hands shake as I walked back upstairs, maybe he'd never really left. I slipped back into bed beside Lisa, and she stirred slightly, reaching out in her sleep to touch my arm. An unconscious gesture. Automatic. The kind of touch that comes from years of sleeping beside the same person. But even her touch felt different now. Contaminated by questions I couldn't answer and suspicions I couldn't shake. I lay there in the darkness, watching the minutes tick by on the bedside clock. 2:47 a.m. 3:15 a.m. 4:03 a.m. Sleep never came. And somewhere in those long hollow hours before dawn, I crossed a line I didn't know existed. The line between the man I was yesterday, The trusting husband, the devoted father, the guy who believed in the foundation we'd built, and someone else. Someone colder. Someone who understood that trust, once broken, doesn't just heal itself with time and hope. By the time the first light started creeping through the blinds, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. I was going to that lake trip. I was going to watch. I was going to learn exactly what I was dealing with. And then, only then, would I decide what to do with the ruins of my marriage. The point of no return wasn't a dramatic moment. It was quiet. It was lying in the dark at 4:37 a.m., feeling my wife's warmth beside me and knowing I couldn't trust anything about her anymore. It was realizing that the man I'd been when I went to bed was gone, and I had no idea who I was becoming. Lake Verona was exactly as beautiful as Lisa had described. Crystal water reflecting the pine trees, cabins scattered along the shoreline, kids' laughter echoing across the water. It should have been perfect. The kind of family weekend you remember for years. Instead, every smile felt like a mask. Every word out of my mouth felt rehearsed. We arrived mid-morning, and I made a show of being excited, of helping unpack, of being the present father and attentive husband. But my eyes kept drifting to the last cabin, the one set back from the others, half hidden by trees. The dark green Durango parked in front of it looked expensive. No, I'm going to take the bike out, I announced after we'd settled in. Check out those trails you mentioned. Lisa looked up from unpacking groceries, and for just a second, less than a heartbeat, I saw something flicker across her face. Relief? Have fun, she said too brightly. Don't go too far. We're doing a campfire cookout later. I fired up the motorcycle, making sure the engine roared loud enough to announce my departure. Let everyone know John was leaving. John was going far away. John wouldn't be watching. But I didn't go far. I rode maybe a quarter-mile down the main trail, then killed the engine and walked the bike into a dense cluster of trees. The silence after the engine died felt enormous. I could hear everything: birds, the distant sound of the lake, voices carrying from the campsite. My heart was pounding as I made my way back on foot, staying in the tree line, moving carefully. I'd done plenty of hiking, plenty of hunting in my younger years. I knew how to move quietly, how to become part of the landscape. It took me 20 minutes to work my way around to a spot where I could see the central area, the picnic tables, the fire pit, the path to the changing rooms and beach. I settled in behind a fallen log, partially hidden by overgrown brush, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. A man emerged from the green Durango. Tall, fit, wearing expensive hiking gear that looked barely used. Even from a distance, I recognized him from the yearbook photo. Older now, but unmistakable. Dom Thompson. He moved with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having to question whether you belong somewhere. I watched him scan the campsite, casual, like he was just another guest enjoying the view. Then Lisa saw him. I watched my wife's face change. Her entire body language shifted. She'd been laughing with her sister Kate, something about marshmallows, and then her eyes found Dom and everything else ceased to exist. Her smile became something different. Something I'd never seen her give me, not in 12 years. She said something to Kate, I was too far away to hear, and started walking toward the changing rooms. Not directly toward Dom. That would be too obvious. But toward the same destination. Dom waited maybe 30 seconds, then followed. My legs felt numb as I moved closer, using the trees as cover. The changing rooms were old wooden structures, worn and weathered, divided into men's and women's sections. I pressed myself against the back wall, barely breathing, and I listened. I'm sorry, Dom. Lisa's voice, quiet but clear through the thin walls. I didn't know John was coming. I thought I had more time to figure this out. It's okay. His voice was smooth, assured. The voice of someone who'd never had to fight for anything because everything had always come easily. We'll make it work. We always do. Silence. Then a soft sound that might have been laughter or might have been something else. God, I've missed you, Lisa said, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. A kind of vulnerability, a rawness. Every time I think I can stop, that I can just focus on my life and forget. You can't forget, Dom interrupted. Neither can I. We tried that already, remember? It doesn't work. I know. More silence. Longer this time. And then sounds that made my stomach turn over. Fabric rustling, breathing that changed rhythm, soft murmurs I couldn't make out but didn't need to. I stood there, frozen against that weathered wood, and felt something inside me crystallize into ice. This wasn't just an emotional affair. This wasn't just old feelings resurfacing. This was physical. This was happening right now, maybe 20 feet from where her children were playing, where her family was setting up for a nice weekend together. Tonight, Dom said, his voice lower now. After the sing-along. Meet me at the hidden leg, you know the spot. We can have some time alone. Really alone. John will be with the kids, Lisa said, and hearing my name in her mouth in this context felt like being punched. He'll be riding his motorcycle during the day. We just have to be careful. When have we ever not been careful? There was amusement in Dom's voice. Like this was a game. Like my entire life was entertainment for him. Lisa laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You're impossible. You love it." Silence again. Then footsteps moving away from each other, time to leave separately. To maintain the illusion. I stayed pressed against that wall long after they'd gone, trying to process what I'd just heard. Trying to reconcile the woman in that changing room with the Lisa who'd kissed our kids goodbye this morning. The Lisa who'd smiled at me over coffee. The Lisa I'd built a life with. We always do. That's what he'd said. We always do. How long? How many of these family trips? How many times had I been the convenient fool, providing cover while they... I couldn't finish the thought. My mind veered away from it, protective, trying to preserve something of the man I'd been. But that man was gone. He'd died somewhere between the yearbook in this moment, and what was left was colder. Harder. When I finally made my way back to the campsite, Lisa was at the picnic table with her sisters, looking relaxed and happy. She saw me approaching and waved. "How was the ride?" she called out. "Good," I said, and my voice sounded normal. "Steady. Really good trails out there." She smiled at me, that wife smile, comfortable and familiar, and went back to her conversation. I stood there watching her, and I realized something profound and terrible. I didn't know her at all. Maybe I never had. The woman I'd married, the mother of my children, the person I'd trusted with every part of my life. She was a stranger wearing a familiar face. And the worst part? She had no idea I knew. She thought she was safe. Thought her secret was intact. Thought she could keep living this double life with me as the unwitting supporting character. But I knew now. I'd heard it with my own ears. And something cold and deliberate settled into my chest where love used to be. If she wanted to play games, if she wanted to treat our marriage like a convenient cover story while she pursued whatever this was with Dom, then fine. But the game had just changed. And she didn't even know it yet. The evening air had turned cool, and the family was gathering around the fire pit. Kate was organizing the marshmallow supplies, the kids were running around collecting sticks, and everyone was settling into that comfortable rhythm of a family evening. Normal. Safe. Innocent. I wasn't feeling any of those things. I'd spent the afternoon watching. Calculating. Lisa and Dom had been careful. Never too close, never obvious. But I saw the glances. The way they positioned themselves with clear sight lines to each other. The way Lisa's entire body seemed oriented toward him, even when she was talking to someone else. Around sunset they'd made their move. Lisa mentioned wanting to take a quick swim before dinner. Dom, 20 minutes later, casually walked toward the beach with a towel. So careful. So practiced. I waited a few minutes, then followed at a distance. They'd gone to a secluded spot. The hidden leg they'd mentioned earlier, I assumed. A small cove partially blocked from view by rocks and overhanging trees. I could see them in the water, and I could see where they'd left their things on the beach. Towels. A blanket. Their clothes folded neatly like they had all the time in the world. Like no one was watching. The plan formed quickly, driven by something cold and surgical in my chest where panic used to be. I moved quietly down to the beach, gathered everything they'd left. The blanket, the towels, every piece of fabric, and carried it all back toward the main campsite. Back at the fire pit, I got to work. The kids were excited, asking what I was doing as I added wood to the fire and pulled out the lighter fluid from our camping supplies. Making the fire bigger, I said, keeping my voice light. Get your marshmallow sticks ready. This is going to be good. I doused the wood thoroughly, then carefully placed the blanket and towels on top. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. This wasn't rage. Rage would have been messy, uncontrolled. This was something else. This was precision. I struck the match. The fire caught with a whoosh, flames leaping high into the darkening sky. The lighter fluid made it roar, an unmistakable blaze that lit up the entire campsite. The kids cheered, rushing forward with their marshmallows, completely oblivious to what was actually burning. Kate looked over, startled by the sudden intensity. Wow, John. That's some fire. Figured we should do it right, I said, watching the fabric catch and curl in the flames. And that's when I saw them. Lisa and Dom standing at the edge of the beach, frozen. The firelight reflected off the water and illuminated their faces perfectly, shock morphing into panic as they realized what was burning. Lisa's hand went to her mouth. Dom looked like he wanted to vanish into thin air. They had nothing. No towels to dry off with. No blanket to wrap up in. No cover story that would explain why they were both wet, both emerging from the hidden cove at the same time, both clearly in need of the items that were currently going up in flames. I met Lisa's eyes across the distance, held her gaze, let her see that I knew, that I'd always known, that every careful plan, every stolen moment, every lie had been seen. Her face drained of color. I turned back to the fire, helping one of the kids adjust their marshmallow stick. Not too close, buddy. You don't want it to catch fire completely. Behind me, I heard hurried footsteps. Whispered, frantic conversation. The sound of Lisa trying to figure out how to return to the campsite without everyone noticing she and Dom had been together. Without everyone seeing what was now completely obvious. Mom's coming, one of the kids called out, and I looked up to see Lisa approaching, wrapped in what looked like Dom's shirt, her hair wet and stringy, her expression carefully blank. The fire got away from me a bit, I said conversationally, like we were discussing the weather. Hope you didn't need any of those towels. She stared at me and I watched the understanding move through her eyes. The realization that this wasn't an accident. That I'd done this deliberately. That the game we'd been playing had fundamentally shifted. It's fine, she managed, her voice barely steady. I'll just go change. She walked past me toward our cabin, and I could feel her fear radiating off her in waves. Dom had disappeared entirely, probably trying to sneak back to his cabin through the woods, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Kate looked between us, her expression confused. Is everything okay? Everything's perfect, I said, turning back to the fire. Just perfect. The kids roasted their marshmallows, laughing and joking, completely unaware that their world had just shifted on its axis. That their father had just drawn a line in the sand that couldn't be uncrossed. I sat there watching the flames consume what was left of the blanket and towels, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just a cold, clear certainty. Lisa had been playing a game where I was supposed to be the fool. The oblivious husband who provided cover for her real life. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. And she was only beginning to understand what that meant. The cabin was quiet, the kind of deep, midday silence that only exists when a place is meant to be full of life and is suddenly, temporarily empty. Everyone was out on the hike, their laughter still a faint echo in the trees outside. I was alone with the ghost in the machine. Lisa's phone sat on the counter, a sleek, black rectangle that held my entire world in its memory. My hands, usually so steady for fixing intricate machinery, trembled as I picked it up. I'd seen her code 1,000 times. A birthday, our anniversary, or so I'd thought. The screen unlocked with a soft click, a sound that felt as loud as a gunshot in the stillness. At first it was clean. Suspiciously clean. The inbox was a curated gallery of family photos, receipts, and mundane updates. My heart, a frantic drum in my chest, began to falter. Had I imagined it all? Was I the paranoid husband seeing monsters in the shadows? But then I remembered her furtive click, the way her body had tensed over the keyboard. I navigated to the deleted folder. And there it was. Pandora's box, not just opened, but its entire contents spilled out before me. Dozens of them. Not weeks, not months. Years. The dates stretched back, a chilling timeline running parallel to the life I thought we were building. Short, aching messages, "Can't wait to see you. Miss you." They were like paper cuts, sharp and stinging. But it was the longer ones that were the real gut punches. They were filled with memories I wasn't a part of, plans for a future I wasn't in, a language of intimacy that was supposed to be ours alone. My eyes scanned the words, each one landing like a physical blow. Change of plans. John is coming with the family. I'll figure something out, but we need to be careful. Meet me at the lake when you can. It was all there. This trip. Last year's trip. The one before that. Every family vacation, every sister's weekend, they weren't just escapes for her. They were opportunities. They were a stage where she played the role of wife and mother, while her heart was with him. The deception wasn't a moment of weakness. It was an architecture carefully built and maintained over years. I stumbled to the kitchen table, the phone feeling like a lead weight in my hand. The room seemed to tilt. I saw the life I'd lived, the early mornings, the long hours at the shop, the pride in providing for my family, and it all crumbled into dust. I wasn't building a life with her. I was funding a life for her. A life she was sharing with someone else. The thought was a vortex, pulling everything into its dark center. The kids, the house, the last 12 years, were they all just props? Was my entire existence a supporting role in a play I never knew I was in? Driven by a morbid, crushing need for confirmation, I found her high school yearbook again. I flipped to his page. Dom Thompson. There he was, smiling out at me, his arm possessively around my wife, my Lisa, in a prom photo. They looked young, in love, a perfect couple frozen in time. And in that moment, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle clicked into place with the force of a seismic shock. I was never part of her plan. The air left my lungs. I wasn't the love of her life. I wasn't even the mistake. I was the safety net. The reliable one. The fallback option when the one she truly wanted couldn't, or wouldn't, give her the stable life she desired. I was the convenient mechanic who could fix her leaking faucet and fund her secret life, too blind to see the rot in the foundation. I stared at their young, hopeful faces, and the truth settled in my chest, cold and heavy as a stone. I had not just lost my wife. I had lost the story of my own life. The narrative I had clung to, of trust, partnership, and shared dreams, was a fiction. And I was left alone in the devastating silence, holding the proof that I had never been the main character at all. The envelope felt heavy in my hand, far heavier than a few sheets of paper had any right to be. I sat in the cab of my truck, the engine off, the world outside continuing its mundane routine. This was it. The final verdict on the life I thought was mine. My thumb slid under the flap, the tears sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. I unfolded the document, my eyes scanning past the legal jargon and official letterhead, searching for the only words that mattered. And there they were. The phrases were clinical, sterile. Probability of paternity, 0%. It was listed 3 times. 3 names. 3 children whose first steps I'd witnessed, whose fevers I'd cooled, whose nightmares I'd soothed. Not one. A sound left my throat, a choked, hollow thing that was more a gasp than a sob. It was as if a physical force had hit me square in the chest, and for a moment, I truly couldn't draw breath. The air was gone. The world outside the windshield blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer, system-wide shock of it. My foundation, the very bedrock upon which I had built my entire adult life, wasn't just cracked. It had vaporized. I stared at the page until the words lost all meaning, becoming just strange black marks. And then, a strange and chilling clarity began to seep into the void left by the devastation. It was the clarity of a puzzle box finally snapping shut. The final, missing piece, the piece I hadn't even let myself fully consider, had just slotted into place. The emails, the lies, the hidden years with Dom, it all clicked into a horrifying, perfect picture. This wasn't just an affair. This was a life built on a lie from the very first day. I hadn't just been her safety net, I had been her dupe. The entire structure of our family, the very legacy I thought I was building, was a mirage. A cold, focused calm descended upon me. The frantic, seething anger was gone, replaced by this icy certainty. There were no more questions to ask, no more secrets to uncover. The truth in its utter brutal totality was now mine. I started the truck and drove home, my hands steady on the wheel. The house was quiet when I entered. I walked through the rooms, seeing them now as a set for a play that had just ended its final performance. I went to the bedroom and pulled my old duffel bag from the closet. I packed methodically, without sentiment. Jeans, t-shirts, toiletries, the few important documents I kept in a lockbox. I was an engineer dismantling a faulty machine, piece by piece. I didn't write a note. I didn't look for her. What words could possibly bridge the chasm that had just opened? Any explanation would be a negotiation, and I was done negotiating with a fiction. As I tossed the bag onto the passenger seat, I took one last look at the house. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. I wasn't abandoning my life. I was walking away from the ruins of it. I needed space, a silent, empty space, to begin the impossible task of untangling my own shattered reality from the beautiful, intricate web of lies she had spun. I pulled away from the curb, the weight of 12 years dissolving into the rearview mirror, leaving only the stark, empty road ahead. The small, functional rental felt more like a command center than a home. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was fertile. In that quiet space, the shock and grief hardened into a cold, unyielding resolve. Her betrayal wasn't just a fracture in our marriage, it was a years-long campaign of deceit, and I would not finance my own destruction any longer. My lawyer's office became my second home. I want a clean break, I told him, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that had once threatened to drown me. No financial support. No settlements. She wanted that house, that life. She can figure out how to pay for it herself. I presented him with the evidence, the archived emails, the timeline, the DNA results that severed my legal obligations. I was dismantling the life she had built on my back, brick by legal brick. When she was served, the frantic calls began. Pleas, at first dripping with a performative hurt that once would have swayed me. Then, when I maintained my silence, the mask slipped. The texts turned venomous, accusing me of abandoning the children. The gall of it, to use them as a weapon after what she had done, solidified my resolve. I had already opened a separate account, a quiet fund for their futures, bypassing her entirely. They were the only innocents in this. The courtroom was the final, clinical severance. The judge heard the facts, saw the proof. The house was awarded to her, but it was a poisoned chalice, a mortgage she couldn't handle alone, with no spousal support to prop her up. The cozy life of lies she'd curated was collapsing under its own debt. And Dom. I made sure he didn't get to slink back into the shadows. My lawyer ensured his role was a matter of public record, a scarlet letter etched into his professional and social life. The last I heard, he'd vanished, a coward to the end, leaving her to face the fallout alone. I moved out of state. The physical distance was a bomb. I found a new job, one that didn't remind me of the long hours I'd worked to fund her deception. I made new friends who knew the man I was now, not the ghost of the man I had been. The kids eventually reached out. The conversations were hard, filled with a pain I never wanted for them. But they were honest. I explained the truth as gently as I could, and we began to build a new relationship on my terms built on honesty, not obligation. The final report came from an old friend. Lisa, drowning in debt, had lost the house and was forced to move back in with her parents. The picture was complete. Sitting on the porch of my small, quiet home, watching a sunset that belonged to no one's memory but my own, I felt it. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something more fundamental, autonomy. The air I breathed was mine. The silence was mine. The future, however uncertain, was mine to shape. For the first time in years, I was no longer a character in someone else's story, no longer a funder of someone else's life. The control was back in my hands. Lisa was left with the consequences of her choices, and I finally was left with myself. And that was everything.